For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, your host for this episode of Under the Dome for the week of Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I'm here today with my politics team colleagues, Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and Bajpai. It's been another wild week at the legislature. Maybe every week is a wild week at the legislature. We've had a lot of caffeine, I think, and we'll need more for whatever else happens this session. So we've got a lot to get through to talk about some of the big things to know going into this week as you all are listening. And let's start with maybe the most dramatic moment, I guess. Like it's the veto override vote, not just in the Senate, but the House, which is the one that overturned Governor Cooper's veto. So take a listen to what that final override vote was like in the House.
The question before the House is the motion that Senate Bill 20 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor. All those in favor will vote aye. All of those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. With 72 having voted in the affirmative and 48 in the negative, the motion carries. Having passed by the requisite 3/5 vote, the House has overridden the governor's veto and the bill becomes law, notwithstanding the governor's objections. So be notified. The gentleman from Caldwell, actually just a moment. The sergeant at arms will clear those who can't follow the rules.
So there was, the House is live streamed now, so people got to see some of that. A lot of people were in the building. We were actually in the room where it happened. What do you think people didn't see that either watched the live stream or heard about it, or the protesters that were in the gallery or not? I remember the Senate override vote earlier. All of the pro-life crowd lined up, filled most of the gallery, and the protesters, abortion rights folks, were outside, so you could kind of hear them outside the glass. But it was different in the House because they had that time to get over there and fill that gallery up.
Yeah. So in the House, it got a little bit rowdy, as you saw in the video, after the final override vote, and people started screaming shame really loudly. And that's happened before, but this time it was, I think, significantly louder. And the representatives also had signs that said something like, politicians don't make good
They make crappy doctors.
Yeah, they make crappy crappy, something like that. So it got a little bit more rowdy than other times, and it was also really packed for reporters. I was sitting way in the back, which was nice that they allowed us to kind of shift our typical locations.
Which typically is not allowed,
So.
And that was something Speaker Moore did because with the press corps, and there were a lot of visiting press from out of town, and we have a lot more room in the Senate corners. In the House, it's cramped. We just have a few seats with the Sergeant at Arms, but Moore had asked the Sergeant at Arms to let us sit in some of overflow staff seats, and then the galleries, of course, were crowded too, and everybody watching otherwise.
Things getting rowdy towards the end, not necessarily unprecedented. It kind of goes with the territory. This is the most, dare I say, the most controversial, contentious, bill to come up this session. So people sort of know what to expect. It's not really a surprise. There's lots of strong feelings on both sides of the debate. What kind of struck me with this week's, or rather last week's, final debates right before Republicans over this veto was that, there was sort of a bit of a sense of inevitability, I thought, because, it felt like both parties kind of knew where this is going. The Republicans said for months that they were going to craft a bill that they knew was going to pass, and that's what they basically did. Rolled it out in early May, and within a week or 10 days or whatever it was, the bill had been enacted into law. So we sort of had a good idea of where this was going. It was just a matter of, honestly, when it was going to happen.
And I think the override, too, was going to happen pretty quick. The Senate rules are that you notify the 24 hours. The House doesn't have to do that. So, somebody said that Speaker Moore isn't going to call the vote unless he has the votes. But you can put things on the calendar and not call the vote, because they did that in, I think, 2019 with the partial birth abortion override, which at that point was, there was not a supermajority. So that was more political messaging for a campaign where they were going to call that. And they were basically trying to catch Democrats, not there. So there was like this whole summer of Monday sessions where it was on the calendar, and are they going to call it or not? But they just wanted to get this done, because I think those feelings were so high. And I thought the protests weren't as maybe because things had spread out over time when it passed each chamber, 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
And then, Cooper he does a lot of bill signing ceremonies, but his veto ceremony was kind of rallying the troops to come, on Bicentennial Plaza with him. And so that would be a third, fourth, fifth time that people would need to come downtown if they're not already downtown, or come to the building to have their say. So
take
it was
time off
full.
work potentially.
Right.
That's a big factor for people.
Well, I feel like the Senate was probably kind of the end of the typical workday. The House was a little bit after dinner time, so maybe
little bit
people
more
who
packed.
got off work came for that. But I mean,
not as late as we were necessarily expecting.
Yeah.
We thought it might go a little bit later, but
there was
they were
no
out
dark
of
of
there by-
night. It
no.
wasn't dark yet. It was like
Not-
8 something.
Yeah,
Or,
just on the cusp of.
Yeah, I mean, if like city council meetings go to like midnight,
Yeah.
State government actually ends much earlier in the day. One thing I did notice with different debates this week is that them noting at 5 o'clock on the dot that the Pages get to go home, because they're teenagers,
Yeah.
so they get to end their days at the usual end of a government workday, where it is
They're
like
very
a couple
mindful,
hours. Yeah.
But on the earlier time frame, that's kind of the inevitability that you mentioned. The debate was a lot shorter than the previous just hearings on the bill. So I think that was also just Democrats weren't doing so many constitutional parliamentary moves and such. So I think that was also kind of it's coming.
I feel like the House didn't do what the Democrats didn't do what the Senate did when the bill first went, or all Senate Democrats talked, but in the House it was a few, and then they had tried, different measure, and that ended the debate. So for the override, they all talked, and Moore let them all talk, and reporters asked him after that final vote, what did you think with the gallery, and he's like, well, that's just what's going to happen. So I think even everybody knows how, like you were saying, with inevitability, everyone knows that people are going to be very upset about it, and that's just what's going to happen. And
one other thing I'd add just really quickly is that, one of the things, kind of the dynamics I think you see going on here with what you're mentioning about the protests sort of being spread out, and it not sort of being consecutive days of, really huge turnouts, not to sort of, say that it wasn't significant. It's still significant when you have hundreds of people come to the legislature, stand outside the gallery. I mean, on the day of the override vote, you still had lots of people standing holding up their signs, basically plastered over the gallery walls, trying to get in. But one of the sort of dynamics at play here, I think, is that, in line with this sort of being inevitable, both parties are sort of now kind of moving on and positioning for where does this go next, looking ahead to next year. I mean, there is a lot of time between now and any serious election talk. I don't want to sort of preempt that too much. We have a lot of time before the election gets underway, the campaign gets underway, but looking at the governor's race and obviously control of the legislature, what happens with the Republican supermajorities, I think that's what both parties are also kind of keeping in mind.
Yeah.
That's what you sort of see with the governor's rally as well. It's not just, you have Attorney General Josh Stein there, who's, the basically presumptive Democratic frontrunner, basically talking about how this isn't like a fight for this week or right now. This is a fight we have to mobilize for the next several months or year, basically, leading up.
I think a lot of the politicians are very conscious of the role of the media in showing them and however they're going to use this in the next campaign. And it's a decision that's going to follow people politically for a long time. The Democrats, of course, are already talking about Republicans could be even stricter next time, so maybe that'll change this next election cycle, maybe it won't. So speaking of cameras and things recorded, we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about a different very volatile moment in the House chamber this week. We'll be right back with more on that, what's coming ahead in General Assembly action, and our headliners of the week. We'll be right back. You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer State Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and Bajpai. Before the break, we were talking about the other contentious thing that happened in the House this week. I was over in the Senate for a pretty run-of-the-mill, boring budget debate, since the budget is not very contentious, or at least not yet this session. But over in the House, they were debating, I think it was opportunity scholarships, right?
Yep. Yeah, sort of prolonged debate, Representative Tricia Cotham's bill on vouchers for private schools. And Representative Abe Jones, Democrat from Wake, was speaking about his opposition to the bill, and basically this, where he falls on this side of this debate over school choice. And something that I don't think anyone was really expecting to happen or to come up. He was giving his remarks, and Representative Jeff McNeely of Iredell County got up to ask him a question. And in the vein of sort of asking his question about school choice, said to Representative Jones basically, did he think,
did you get into Harvard because you're black or an athlete? Right?
Yeah, basically. Do you think that you would have achieved that success? We have a clip of that for anyone who missed it.
Yeah, so here's that exchange with Representative Abe Jones, the Democrat, Representative Jeff McNeely, the Republican, and then House Democratic leader Robert Reeves, part of that as well. So take a listen to what that exchange was.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the representative a question?
Representative Jones, does the gentleman yield to a question from the gentleman from Iredell, Representative McNeely?
I absolutely will yield. Yes,
He
sir.
yields.
Representative Jones, I want to ask you the question is, I understand that you went into public school and you went to Harvard and Harvard Law. And the question, I guess, is, would you have been able to maybe achieve this if you were not an athlete or a minority or any of these things, but you were a student trapped in a school that the slowest, in the wild we'll say the slowest gazelle does not survive, but yet the herd moves at that pace. So the brightest child sometimes is held back. And don't we
point of
feel
order.
Gentleman may state his point of order.
Okay, I'm hoping I wasn't the only one that got shocked by that comment, that the only reason you went to Harvard is because you were black and an athlete?
I did not say that. I said, did that end up being one of the reasons? I do not know that. I asked him
all
this. I asked him this.
Okay, all right.
I don't mind answering.
Gentleman doesn't answer the question. Sorry, I was reading the note here, so I didn't hear what was.
I apologize, and I'll reframe.
The gentleman from Iredell is no longer recognized. For what purpose the lady from Wake, Representative Gill, rise? Representative Jones, do you still have the floor, sir, to
I
debate?
was trying to wrap up.
The gentleman has the floor to wrap up his remarks.
Okay. I just want to say that I'm just going to say one thing. Harvard had 5 rankings for their students. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I graduated from Harvard, I was in rank 2. So I earned my place, and I did well. Now,
So there was immediate fallout after that. Speaker Moore cut McNeely's mic. McNeely apologized, but it was there. It was recorded on video. It was immediately went out, got national attention. And Democratic leader Reeves put out a statement, as well as something else that our former NNO colleague, but still a press corps colleague, Will Doran, caught during the House abortion debate we were talking about like having to sit other places, where he heard Representative Keith Kidwell make a insult Representative Diamond Staten Williams, saying, where she was talking about religion, and he said, made quips Church of Satan.
Yeah.
So those were two things all within about 24 hours
Yep.
or so that really changed, like the tenor in the House is really next level of not being happy with each other at all. And Kidwell and McNeely are both in the Freedom Caucus,
Yep.
which is this very ultra-conservative group. I don't know exactly how many House members are in it. Bobby Hannick, who's now in the Senate, was in it before. Larry Pittman, who's no longer in the House.
Ben Moss
was
as
in
well.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so McNeely said maybe what he has said not on the House floor in the
Yeah.
past, and said it, and immediate condemnation from everybody.
Yeah, he drew condemnation from everyone. There were some audible gasps. So people were, Representative Reeves too was. He looked pretty flabbergasted was the word that came to mind. He looked pretty shocked. McNeely did apologize on the House floor. He also reportedly, apologized in private to Representative Jones, and Jones accepted the apology. So they sort of, moved on from that. But Jones also he said in his statement that is inexcusable language. That's something to sort of question. I think what the interesting thing or the sort of noteworthy thing with these incidents is this. You sort of see this happen. You have weeks on end where people are collegial and sort of bantering around a little bit, and relations are pretty good between the two parties. But then you have some high-profile, tense moments. You have some tense bills come up, or tense votes, like the override for the gun bill that we covered a couple of months ago, where debate was cut off on that as well, and that was a tense moment. So you sort of have this situation where Republicans have, they've achieved their supermajority, and part of what that means is that, when they sort of reach a point where they feel like we've debated this enough, we have the votes to pass this bill into law, to defeat a veto, we're going to do what, we have the votes, we're going to do what's on our agenda. That sort of inherently brings some extra levels of tension.
Yeah.
And you have, we talked to, I caught Reeves after, while that debate was going on, and asked him about this, and he said, he thinks actually leaders of both parties in the House have done a good job of maintaining decorum, but these incidents do pop up. And I think it's reflective of the fact that it's not just leaders who are sort of maintaining relations or maintaining decorum. You have 120 members.
Right, and the House is a lot rowdier than the Senate. What do you think this means for the rest of the legislative session?
I was about to ask that to y'all, but I'm just curious to see if that'll have any consequences for those representatives who had kind of those outbursts in terms of future committees, appointments, or if not, I don't really know.
I think that, the committee appointments, the people in charge of the building also control where people's offices are. So there's been payback in that way in the past, and the Senate obviously is much more formal. But it was interesting to watch the interaction between Senate Leader Berger and the Democrats who spoke beyond their time, and how they, in their very formal way, argued, which is a lot different than the House, which of course is notably more rowdy.
Yeah.
So coming up this week, we've got sports betting is coming back again. We'll find out what happens. It'll be in the Senate. It'll probably change from the House. And budget negotiations start. So part of the reason the Senate budget was kind of a dull debate is because it's not going to be the actual budget. It's just the Senate saying this is what we want. We already know what the House wants. And then now the real budget is going to be negotiated behind closed doors, pretty much, for the most part.
It is just one thing on that. It is interesting to see the Democrats who voted for that budget in the Senate.
Right, they'll probably be
and
the
being
conferees.
conferees. Yeah, that was interesting.
All right, so let's go to headliner of the
Okay.
week while we still have time. Luciana, what is your headliner of the week?
Well, I have been wanting to go to the movies for a while. I haven't really seen any movie that catches my attention too much, but I saw that Fast and Furious, I don't know what it is at this
25?
point.
Yeah.
Is coming out. I don't know if I'll see it, but I thought that was interesting that that's still going on. So,
All right, what's your headliner?
Going along with the movies, I'm a big fan of Scorsese movies, and he's been collaborating with some of his usual favorite go-to actors. Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro. So really interesting looking movie coming out later this year. Killers of the Flower Moon. Looks pretty intriguing, but great
The
cast.
cast sounds great.
Yeah, John Lithgow too. So I'm excited for
Niro and
that.
DiCaprio.
Yeah.
You've seen Departed, I assume,
Yes,
then, right?
I think that's probably my favorite Scorsese movie.
So I legit became a Dropkick Murphys fan because Should Be On to Boston was from that movie.
Yeah.
I don't even remember when that came out, but
Yeah.
that's a good police movie. All right, my headliner, I'll also pick a movie. It's not violent or has car racing. It's Under the Sea, and it's the live action Little Mermaid, which I really just cannot wait for it all.
Never been to a live action movie, so
Well, we should go see the Little Mermaid
yeah,
together. Right?
yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, so future Under the Dome Little Mermaid crossover episodes. All right, I'm Dawn Vaughan for Luciana and Avi. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.